and we ended at 430 in Veltus. And so the one piece was whether you wanted to make any immediate improvements, and by that I mean like the ones that have already been made since before you set the work session. You cleared some trees and did some grading at the boat ramp. The next step there might be to pour concrete, might be to pave another lane with another little boat access there, and target those smaller improvements now. And the other direction I guess staff was looking for is, how do you want to use the Lacey plan from here? How do you want to, how or do you want to use the 2014 Lacey plan? How or do you want to use Dean Moffett? Do you want to make any short-term improvements? Are you tying this in any way to the confluence? And those are sort of all the questions, and that's what you're here to sort of talk through, I think.
Well, I mean, I didn't go on the little field trip, but I've been through both those parks extensively, so, and at all times. Both are used intensively, certainly in the non-winter months. Veltus even more so, I think, in the shoulder months. But certainly an extra expanded boat ramp, I guess we'll call it that, I think is really important. I'd like to see that done sooner rather than later. And I'd like to move forward with essentially elements that I think that are kind of similar to the Lacey plan. I think that the plan is kind of compatible with what's going on down at the wave area, the stepped embankments and all of that. So if you're looking for some sort of congruency in terms of design and all of that, that might be a place to look or work off of, just as a thought. Not sold on anything, but I think, you know, it's important to do something there because those two parks are very intensively used by the community. I'd like to see something happen there.
You know,
Well, and Steve Beckley is using Lacey for his area too.
right, that's information that would be helpful for Stephen and Matt, in that Steve Beckley is currently designing improvements to his bank down there along Iron Mountain. And there's a idea that it would be really nice to continue that, you know, all the way up through Two Rivers Park, and obviously, you know, you can keep going up through the confluence and cross over and go to Veltus Park. But there's one suggestion was that we try to piggyback onto Lacey in terms of the permitting with the Corps of Engineers, and there's another element that was discussed fairly extensively at the beginning of the meeting. You know, where there's that island or gravel bar out in the middle of the river, just immediately upstream of the Devereaux Road Bridge.
Yes.
That used to actually be a real island 50, 60 years ago, and it was excavated for, we believe, the construction of the Devereaux Road Bridge and or I-70 back in the 1960s. There's a element of Dean Moffett's plan that I think was generally received fairly well from a element standpoint. That was to basically rehabilitate or recreate, if you would, that island. To do so, we could perhaps use a lot of the stone that's going to be coming out of the bridge causeway up here, but that is a fairly
Lengthy,
difficult and challenging permitting process. It may not be that expensive if we have the material available in terms of the construction, but the permitting process is probably going to be very challenging. And so there's a question: do we want to engage Lacey to at least even, you know, study that and look at the permitting of that?
I don't know. I mean, people kind of wander out there on occasion when they can. It's kind of hard to walk around out there. The rocks are loose.
Yeah, the idea would be you raise the elevation, you know, 5, 8, 10 feet. I don't know, you know, I mean, that's what the plan would determine.
Would you put soil on there and irrigate it and do all that? And
Yep.
similar, and how would you provide access? Build a bridge or
Little
something?
ped bridge, and you dredge out that little creek so you had water running down, that year round. So, I mean, it could be a very, very cool.
I mean, it's a neat idea, it just sounds expensive, because then you have to really, really worry about improvements and worry about scour on the north bank there, right? Just upstream from Devereaux Road, more so than you do now. Right now, you don't have to worry about that a few weeks out of the year. I think if you channelize it.
I don't know that we'd
Put
be
more water in it.
talking about building it if we didn't if we can't really use that causeway, because there's $1.5 million worth of fill in there that's gonna end up needing to go somewhere. So
I mean,
maybe, I'm just
yeah.
saying maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine idea, I mean, but there's a lot more expense than just putting broken
Oh, yeah.
rock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's from A to B.
But if we can even get that part of it done, then bringing in the topsoil type fill material and whatever park improvements is something that could happen
Yeah.
down the road.
I mean, it's a good idea. I think having some sort of riverbank improvement there that you can do picnic on or whatever. I guess there was a disagreement on whether to do stepped versus some sort of gradiated kind of thing. I mean, steps would be more functional, in my opinion. Certainly would follow the design cues that are already in place downstream at the wave. And it's proven fairly popular to use down there. But again, yeah, whatever, let's get it done. I think it's
Can we-
important. Very popular place.
Step back a little bit, refresh me or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think prior discussion that we had indicated that the real high priority was, and the part that was really at risk is the bank at Veltus. And it seems to me that maybe that's the immediate need in terms of stabilization at least.
Well, actually, the majority of opinion from the group on the tour was that the Two Rivers was probably the priority, although Andrew did say, we could do something to stabilize Veltus without really doing anything to it, but,
I'd be talking about two different things though, because I think Stephen's talking about erosion and you're talking about aesthetics. Because
no,
aesthetically,
I'm talking about erosion too.
oh, I didn't think
Veltus.
I didn't think Two Rivers necessarily was a
No,
big erosion
no,
thing because of the way the
No, Two
river.
Rivers with the boat ramp and those things, I think that I came away with the idea that was the priority.
Yeah, although, yes, Stephen, it was conceded that erosion at Veltus is a concern. It has been going on for 30 years. The point was made, is another 2 or 3 years going to matter? That question wasn't actually answered, but I think in general, the feeling was that the improvements at Two Rivers Park were considered I would say a higher priority by the overall group. And recognizing that might result in some additional erosion at Veltus in the interim.
One other thing was connecting the pedestrian trail at the Two Rivers Ped Bridge back to 116, and that's could be asphalt that you may need to redo, but the higher priority was making that trail functional.
Right.
And I did want clarification on the boat ramp. If you're talking about making those improvements now, my understanding was you were trying to do two things. You were trying to not pave, with concrete, expand the boat ramp into that new third lane that you've made, but also there was a road with another, looked like a one-lane access.
On the west,
Yeah, well, no, to the east of that.
oh, to the east.
Yeah,
To the north.
to the east. To the east.
Do we have any
There's
of
boat ramp with two concrete lanes and a third lane that you would now put in concrete.
Right.
But to the east of that, there's a natural slope down that looks like it could support a one lane.
Yeah, it just needs to be wide.
Okay,
cleaned
but
up.
that's when you say improve the boat ramps, that's what you're talking about. Concrete in that third lane and effectively building a fourth lane.
Add capacity,
Yeah.
that's fine. I think it's really important.
All right.
That is the most intensively used piece of real estate in the park system.
Is that a consensus? Can I go and name that
I
as
guess-
6? Or
I
premature?
wasn't aware of the fourth lane. I was involved in discussions on the three-laning it, and I don't know that there's anyone who's opposed to that, is there? I mean, are any of us opposed to that? I would just like that with respect to that fourth lane, that's where I do think we need to come up with a plan for what we're going to do with the bank on the rest of the park. And if that fourth lane works in that plan, that's great. And if it doesn't,
You got three.
then we end up with 3 lanes and.
Okay.
Well, and I think the fourth lane that he's referring to, and I'm sorry, was late. It was important. I wasn't just out like sunbathing.
Proof of that.
That fourth lane that you're talking about is actually almost like a widened social path right now down to the river, and people are actually carrying, it's a perfect spot to carry up a kayak or a canoe or something like that. It's just a carry-up thing. There's no cars or traffic over there. There's no reason why you.
Is that why it's so worn out? Because it looks like, I mean, it's pretty well used.
Well, and we pulled some concrete out of that, and ever since we did, you know, that one big, huge block of concrete that had the steel shaft in the middle of it, we took that out a couple of weeks ago, and that sat right there. And so now that that's gone, it's like, now that's being used. So, you know, if they were down there, I think the fourth lane, it just needs a little cleanup. It's nothing you're going to concrete.
So it's more of an non-commercial,
Absolutely.
informal way to get into the river.
Yeah.
Just walking, you're not going to dock a boat trailer down that.
No,
You're gonna-
you can't drive to it at
It's
all.
a foot portage.
It
That may
is.
be a better way to do it anyway, the way you separate the commercial traffic from
Yeah.
people like me.
You know, 50% of the boat users down there are carry-up, deflate, roll-up kind of users. And the conflict right now is that you got a boat trailer in the water. There was, 2 weeks ago, there was no place you could walk a boat up. So everybody just stacks up there. Next thing you had 20 boats stacked up waiting on some yahoo to figure out, learn how to back a boat trailer, you know.
So to clear that up a little bit is not really committing to any future course.
No, not at all.
Are you okay with that, Mike? So are you all okay with then concrete to create the third boat lane at the main ramp and just clean up what I'm calling the fourth lane without doing any further improvement to it? Is that direction to staff?
Yeah.
You want to do concrete down there now?
No, just concrete on the third lane,
No, I mean,
not on the fourth lane.
no, but even concrete now, or do you just want to create the gravel base down to the water's edge, so it's used during this season, and then at the end of the season?
I don't think
for the ramp?
you wouldn't want how
Whatever,
it
until the low water, right?
Yeah, you're not going to do anything before late fall anyway, and I think if you're going to pour any concrete, you're going to have to go through some permitting process.
Plus you want to pour in shallow water.
Right,
anyway.
right. Maybe, maybe a nationwide permit, but fairly low bureaucracy level, pretty easy to accomplish.
So I'm still having a hard time putting all this together coherently.
We are too, so don't worry
It
about it.
seems pretty fragmented. And
There's,
the whole point, to me, of this discussion was to try to achieve some kind of a coherent plan to move forward on. And I don't see that happening. I see a bunch of little pieces being thrown around. And I'm concerned that we're going to lose design continuity, and we're going to lose the ability to make this all come together in a way that makes sense and that achieves some economy of scale. And
Well, I think that's an unanswered question. The other one is like, do you want to continue with the Lacey plan? I like the Lacey plan personally, I think it's good. And kind of use that as the design reference set for all future development in the parklands, and hopefully the private folks would follow along as well, like Mr.
well, and I have no dog in this, but we have somebody here, Dean Moffett, who spent lots of hours doing a lot of stuff and did the original plan on Two Rivers Park, who has the ability to help us go forward. We need to think long and hard about that in terms of whether or not that's a good idea in terms of us husbanding our dollars well and The cost seemed pretty reasonable to me, and I liked what I saw to begin with, so I'm just saying, where are we headed? How are we going to make this? Because I think this is not something that I want to see put off very long. We're going to have to coordinate with raw materials that are going to be available. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but, you know, when you start looking at the design Dean had for reestablishing that island, it was pretty spectacular, and so we know where we can get the materials to start to do some of that stuff, and so I'm just saying, it seems to me we need to have a discussion around how we're going to make all of this coalesce into an effort that makes sense across the board. This
Yeah.
is my take.
Everything that you said is still moving forward, everything, the big picture concepts and Lacey Plan and Shoreline development. And there was a second discussion about, are there small things that we can do now that are going to benefit people now without compromising anything in the future? So at the park right now, there are 2 concrete lanes, and there was a messy lane that we've since cleaned up. It's effectively a 3rd lane with a very nice boulder treatment on the east side. And so the only discussion was, at the appropriate time in the season, to make that concrete too. So it's three cars wide instead of two cars
Isn't
wide.
that just a 2nd lane, actually?
All right,
Yeah.
whatever.
So physically,
1.5.
physically today, we have 1 concrete lane and we
All right.
have 1 gravel lane.
Okay, so creating 2 concrete lanes. I was saying 3rd, it's 2.
Yeah, it's like 15 feet wide.
And there's already being used that, what you call the foot portage, that's being heavily used. All we want to do is just clean it up. No improvements there.
Which is a half hour.
Right.
kind of, And it wouldn't compromise anything in the future.
Yeah.
It would just
could
give
always
it
be adjusted.
another relief valve there. But certainly, we want to go forward with when appropriate, with a large plan, you know, well thought out and put together to kind of clean that whole riverbank up.
But I don't think, you know, when I was talking about a plan down at wherever we were at, it's not necessarily waiting for the confluence the master plan for the confluence to happen, because I don't think we want to wait that long. I mean, you know, hopefully it won't take that long, but we still need to move forward with this. But, you know, to make sure that what we do in Two Rivers all along that area is part of the plan. And what we do in Veltas is part of the plan, you know, so that was.
So how do we get to, if you will, the plan? I mean, the materials, are we doing a hard service, soft service? What does it look like? How's it gonna, I mean, how do you get to,
And I
like,
guess
the plan that we're doing?
I'm unclear, what was the process that the Lacey plan went through? Because I am unclear what that process was.
Tom?
The Lacey plan started with the formation of a task force based on some community input. The task force did some public meetings, went to their own service groups and things like that, and took that information from those meetings and put together the top 10 list of things that they wanted to impact in the shoreline area, which was about, I think we put a maximum of 60 feet from the water's edge going back, so we had a very defined area. Then it was working with Gary. He followed up, had additional public meetings with boards and commissions, with the public as well, and created his treatment and his recommendations for both Two Rivers and Veltas. But one of his big assumptions was that we were going to use material from what's now the causeway for the shoreline treatment. However, if you look at a lot of that material, it's really not appropriate for user-friendly shoreline treatment because of sharp edges and things like that. Could it be used as fill in areas? Certainly, it might be saying. So that's really where that process went. So in December of 2014, then the council approved the Gary Lacey plan, and along with a timeline, projected timeline based on those materials being available from CDOT, which was 2016 for final design and engineering, and then 2017 construction.
So there was significant public input to that map.
You know, as much as you can get for some of those kinds of things. It's kind of like, Mike, you were saying today, there were 17 different conversations going on. You try to pull people in and get consensus, and the thing that we kept hearing was, we want to get people closer to the water's edge safely. ADA compliance, like Steve was saying, the boat ramp is an important issue. It's not the commercial operators that are the problems, it's the weekend warriors that like to drink a six-pack and then try to back up a trailer. So it's looking at those kind of considerations at Two Rivers Park. Veltus, if you remember, the cost for doing Veltus was considered quite a bit less, because most of the work that was there was considered to be shoreline restoration, dealing with the erosion. But Two Rivers was significantly more emphasis on aesthetics and function. And the idea there being great place to have a river walk, great opportunity to go underneath the bridge on Devereaux and extend past the Iron Springs. So the thinking was there, and then, quite honestly, the reason why this came back to you a couple months ago was because I was made aware that there wasn't as much support for the Gary Lacey visual as what was expressed in 2014. And that's okay, because we get one chance to do this. Let's do it right. And that's when I came back to Dean, who was the original designer on that, and asked him for some of his input, and why I came back to you a few weeks ago and said, look, if you want to spend some money on this, basically kind of going to what Leslie's used, do a charrette, right? That's the word, or whatever, where you have a chance to sit down, Park and Rec Board, River Commission, whatever, and facilitate something so that there's something that there's consensus on coming out of that meeting, so we can move ahead and get you pricing and still possibly keep this in queue for 2017 or 2018.
And Kathy, as far as the public input aspect of your question goes, I was part of that task force that Tom put together, and there were multiple meetings, and there's no question but that making the shoreline at Two Rivers Park user-friendly, attractive, safe, and inviting was #1 priority. And on a timeline that enjoyed the top priority to get it done soon.
Great,
If I could just add one more thing, this is the draft, and it has page after page of those comments. They're actually transcribed in the back. So you can, if you can get a whole copy of this, you can get updated.
Oh, it might be an email somewhere.
I don't know. Is that something that we could get put back in the Dropbox folder or something?
Lacey plan?
Yeah.
Sure. It's
I may have downloaded it onto my computer, but
Steve.
Mayor, can I explain
Wanna build a boat ramp? Done.
sure.
Tom at Barnes called.
Why don't you come on up to the table, Dean?
Something back, maybe speed it up.
Oh, you mean,
Tired.
Tom called me a couple of months ago and said, we need a phase called design development, which is to take my original 37-year-old design, Gary Lacey's phase 2, and make it phase 3, design development. In other words, update the designs, redo the estimates, and that's what my proposal is that Gary's had now for several weeks. What it does is it takes all the plans, all the public input, and makes some sense out of it with current issues that are going on. The 2 pipes that come in at the pedestrian bridge, the fact that Gary left off the island in his work, it was in my work. But the whole idea is to update this, get it before you all, and then prioritize what to do. Ramps, access, pick the pieces, what can we do? How can we move forward using the material that's available, things of that nature. Lay back the shore in a couple of places. Get the concrete out of there. What are the permitting issues? I started doing base map work with Trent Hyatt. We started talking about funding. We've been scoping on all the funding. I've been going to various riparian workshops and tuning in on the Roaring Fork and Colorado River projects that are going elsewhere. So what is before you is a $25,000 not to exceed hourly rate proposal to do phase 3, which is called design development, which is to bring this from concept to a working plan that you can then prioritize and decide how to move forward. That's basically it, and that's what we've been working on for some time now.
So, in my world, I kind of call that a final set of construction plans. Is that,
No,
No?
it precedes that by one step.
okay? So I guess my concern with that is that while I think we need to get to that point, right now, I don't think we have consensus. As I mentioned it during at the beginning of the on-site meeting, I think there's kind of two different issues we need to focus on. One is what elements do we want? Where do we want those elements? And the second thing is what aesthetic treatment do we want? Do we want a completely natural-looking slope? Do we want a more urban-style treatment like you would see at Cherry Creek in downtown Denver?
Like a form liner wall or natural
stone, it could be a
boulders.
stone wall. I mean, I'm just saying, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of the gamut of aesthetic treatments. And then, and today, I don't know, I mean, if we said, okay, Dean, go ahead, I'm not sure we collectively have in our minds what we want, you know what I mean? And so I don't want to just take $25,000 shots in the dark at a target that none of us can see right now. I think that we need to step back, figure out what elements we want where. I think a charrette is perhaps the right approach to figure out. It's not unlike what happened on the 6th Street project where you had lots of pictures and it's like, ooh, I really like that one, ooh, I really don't like that one, kind of a thing. Then we start coalescing around certain elements, which is not unlike what we did on the Grand Avenue Bridge project in total. I think right now we don't really have a lot of consensus on the elements or the aesthetics, and so I don't know that we can tell you to go on anything.
I think a charrette approach is doable. Today I picked up at least 24 different feelings and ideas from everybody. They're all compatible with each other. There's 1,500 feet of shore at Two Rivers. There's obviously an urban situation in one area. There's obviously a more natural riverbank in another area. We should keep in mind riparian restoration. When we start to remove concrete, which we can do from the shore, we don't have to get in the river to do that, we'll find other opportunities for fishing, opportunities for quiet water. And I think everything discussed today, everything that I recorded, is very doable in a beautiful park, a shoreline that we're proud of, not embarrassed by, and one that is functional for a variety of users. I don't have any conceptual problem whether it be only Cherry Creek or only Salida or only Basalt has done a very nice job. It's all very naturalistic, but it deals with a different kind of water. Our water's quite unique and quite awesome and quite strong, and we have to recognize that. So I think a charrette approach would flush out consensus, and if it's show and tell like 6th Street, we can do that.
Except that in the 6th Street example, you have an engaged designer who's gathering information and drawing it up and putting it out. So who would do that in this case?
I'm offering that.
Is that what you were envisioning?
That I don't know has been, I guess I'm not suggesting at this point that we hire
Anybody?
Dean or
Anybody.
Lacey or Jim Bob Smith, I don't know what consultant we want to hire necessarily, but you know, I just think, I'm trying to think of process, and then we can figure out, you know, what the, you know, who would be the best consultant to employ for that.
Just off the top of my head, why wouldn't you ask Lacey to come back and represent the existing plan for those who aren't familiar with it, and start to, you know, refresh the work that you've already done?
I think that could be a very appropriate,
It's in our Dropbox, by the way, the Lacey plan.
okay.
Yeah, I just want to move forward. I mean, we had the luxury of the DDA doing all this choosing of designers and all that stuff for the other stuff, so let's start. Let's start with something, you know?
And I don't think that there's any reason that we can't do the boat ramp and the other access and get that done, you know, so.
Yeah, I would agree with that, that it's.
Yeah.
Minor mods and facade treatments, whatever, later on, so be it. You know, it's-
I mean, that was an important issue that had to be dealt with immediately, not later. Tom and actually Dave Rippey, who donated a lot of his time and equipment down there and made great strides in the last couple of weeks. Doesn't affect the design in the future at all. It's certainly going to clean up some of the ramp rage that we have down there in the next 90 days. Ramp rage. It's worse than road rage. Because most people are all liquored up at that point, you know.
It's like, kind of, and this is no offense to the DDA, but I feel like I'm at a DDA meeting, because, you know, we talk about a lot of different ideas and different looks on 6th Street and 7th Street. But until you have 2 or 3, you know, really, really close to what can happen designs sitting in front of a group of decision makers, it's just talk. We're all just, you know,
Well,
what do you want to do?
I guess my point is, you already have that.
Yeah, we have to move
Dean
some
has
sketches.
Dean has a very good place for that charrette to start from.
If you don't want to do that, we can go out and do an RFP and start that process today, or not today, tomorrow. I mean, what do you want to do?
You know,
Well, I think the charrette
you got a willing horse who's very accomplished, who's willing to put his efforts into this. I don't see the problem with this.
Yeah, I just
You
think
know,
we need to-
it puts something in front of a group of
You
people,
can do it.
including us, the River Commission, the DDA, whomever needs to be involved, and gets us started. It gets us going down the road. And I think, personally, from my own point of view, and again, I have no dog in this hunt, but a $25,000 price tag is a pretty darn good deal if you want to carry this through. And part of that now might be spent in his time holding charrette. But
Okay.
at the very least, we have the ability, we have something to look at that we can start from. It doesn't mean it's final, it means it's a starting point.
Yeah, well,
But it's there
well, that's what
already.
I'm saying, for me, that's what I need to understand. What's it gonna look like? How is it gonna be user-friendly? How are people gonna get down to that riverfront? Is it hard surface, soft surface? You know, when Mike, you made a kind of a visual representation of what a laid-back shoreline at Veltus would look like. I was a little taken back by that, how far.
And that's only, you go, you know, if you want a 4-to-1 slope, got a 4-foot bank, you're going back 16 feet.
You know, when you
at
did that, I
2
was like,
rivers,
ooh.
Okay.
you got a 15-foot slope,
Well,
you
you're not-
want a 4-to-1, you know, 15-foot bank, you're going back 16
I say,
feet.
let's find a way to get some designers to design something.
But why
You
can't,
do not need to be in the design business.
No, I don't wanna be. I'm
we've
terrible
got
at
2
that.
designs now, why can't we bring them both in and look at them both and do a charrette based with at least
With what we
those to
got.
begin with? I don't know.
Yeah, and-
Leslie, you do more
and,
charrettes than anybody, so.
You know, Dean's sitting right here in front of us, and I don't know why he can't help us move that forward. It's not, you're not writing him a check for $25,000. It's not to exceed money. You've got an hourly rate, which I'm sure is reasonable, and maybe he can help us even using both those plans and help get us down the road. We can fire him anytime we want to.
Do you have a majority on that?
So,
I
Well,
like that.
I would actually like to see, Tom Lacy come back in and just, be involved in that part of the process, I guess. is
Gary
my-
Lacy.
Yeah.
I mean, Gary
Gary
Lacy.
Lacy.
Well, I agree. And can you guys work together or not at all, or is this?
We've known each other for a number of years.
I mean,
Well, that doesn't mean you
does
can
that
work.
mean you can work together?
All right, so
Just kidding.
I mean, is that something that you guys,
what I interpret is you want to obtain Dean
At some point,
to
that's-
begin design work, and
Right.
step one is to contact Gary Lacy.
I would say step one is to prepare for and conduct a charrette.
But you,
A charrette is basically where you're using, in the old days, onion skin, and
okay,
it sketches on.
somebody's got to organize and do that. So if that's something that Dean is willing to do, are you willing to?
But I guess I would suggest a dual consultant. We're hiring Dean and we're hiring Tom Lacy, or Gary Lacy. Sorry, I keep saying Tom. Does that make sense?
I mean, how did Gary Lacy?
And just to do a
Gary's-
contract
he's
or
an engineer.
whatever for the charrette, just to do.
What'd you say? One
Yeah,
contract?
just simply to do the charrette so that we can get an idea as to, I mean,
Bring the
and,
existing.
Is
you know,
it-
it's
is
not,
it-
I remember back when the group you now work for, their former group, the Sonoran Institute, was doing
Community builders.
a plan for the confluence. If I'm not mistaken, there was 5 different design consultants involved in that. You had Jim Leggett, you had Jim
Charlier.
Charlier. There was like 2 or 3 other ones.
And it was a lot more than $25,000, Michael.
Well, not for a single charrette.
Well, but for the process to hire those consultants, I don't know what your budget was, but it was considerably more than
But
25.
all I'm suggesting is that I think that the best approach we can take, and I've suggested the same thing with some of our bridge designs with city bridges, is to get ideas from multiple consultants. And I kind of like to expand it even personally beyond Dean and Tom, or Gary Lacy. See, is there any other renowned riverbank restoration / improvement consultants out there that can come in for a one-day charrette? A one-day charrette is not going to cost us $25,000. If it does, we're not getting kissed.
If you have,
Leslie?
it depends on how many designers participate.
Yeah, if we had 25,000 of them,
Or
I mean 25 of them, yeah.
Leslie?
You know, one idea is to hire, and Andrew, I don't know if you were thinking about this the same time I was, but one idea is to hire a really good illustrator, like a Jim Leggett, who's fast, and say, we need a day of your time, and, and then you put all the ideas on an equal playing field, because they're all illustrated the same way, and you say, okay, show me this, 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 and this. And, I mean, the key to a great charrette is that kind of talent that draws fast, and so that we can all evaluate.
Right.
But I don't know, Andrew, what were you thinking?
Well, I was going to respond to Mike's comment. You have another equally talented firm already in your employ, in that Scott Shipley, S2O, again, they do these kind of park designs around the country. They have graphics people and architects that they work with, so they might be another firm. River Restoration is another firm locally based that also does this kind of work. So there are multiple firms that specialize in this kind of riverfront river interface kind of design work. But Leslie's right. I mean, if you want to come out with something at the end of the day or 2 days, graphics is
Is
king.
That's 5. That's 5. Gary Lacy, Dean Moffett, Jim Leggett, Scott Shipley, and River Restoration. And you could just invite those 5 to a day and have them produce something.
You're not all the same skills.
Is that, I mean,
Yes.
how do you see that being organized, Leslie? Something like that?
I was going to say, is that within the bounds of the DDA, Leslie?
You guys
The
have,
only reason I'm commenting out of respect to some very knowledgeable people in the room is just because I've done so many charrettes.
right,
So
that's why.
the only reason why I want to say that to those of you, but, Andrew, I mean, you've done it for years too. I mean, it's the illustrator that kind of brings it all together and puts it out there. It's the pretty pictures. So you've got the guys that are thinking of the ideas, and then you've got the guy, or maybe, you know, in those firms that you just listed, they have somebody that can quickly draw, you know, 3 alternatives so that you guys can see and decide which way you want to go. But I don't think you need 5 firms, because I think you'd spend $25,000, you
Okay.
know?
That's what I need for someone. I just need illustrations, because I have no vision for landscaping, zero, so.
Gary Lacy, Dean Moffett, and an illustrator?
Yeah, they don't have somebody like Jim that can crank that stuff out as you progress. That's not their forte. I think there's some value too to have somebody with some engineering background as part of this charrette.
Is Gary, I know Gary does,
Gary's a PE.
is he a PE?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. What about Scott Shipley?
He's an engineer.
He's an engineer as well?
And Dean can sort of mollify, soften that PE into a little more aesthetic.
Yeah.
Humanize.
Trying to help.
I'm pretty comfortable if we had Dean working with Gary and we get an illustrator involved, have him come up with some ideas, do a per hourly thing, see what it costs. If we like it, move on. If we don't like it, we'll step back and maybe look at some other ideas. And maybe that's the way to do this.
Mike?
We should move, we need to figure out a way to move forward on this.
I agree.
That's the number one thing. We're sitting here talking about the 2014 plan in 2016. I don't want to be sitting here in 2018 talking about the 2016 plan.
As a separate thread, we'll do these other
I don't
critical
want you to be
improvements.
either, because I want to be able to walk down the shoreline at Two Rivers Park and throw a line in the water
Yeah,
and have it be a fisherman's experience.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to be able to walk it rather than have a bench with my name on it. That's making a big assumption.
It is.
Can you live with that?
So-
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think the plans that everybody's talking about and putting together, I mean, Lacey's and Dean's are, somewhere in there, there's a solution, but I think it's gotta be illustrated, especially for those people who can't see. You know, I kinda hear what everyone's saying, makes sense. I'd just like to see it, and I know the public will, and if we get it wrong, we're gonna get hammered. So, let's just make sure we get it as right as possible. I mean, not everybody's gonna like anything, but get it
And
as
if you
right
guys
as.
want it, I mean, I'll make the contacts, I'll work with Leslie, I'll work with Andrew on it, we can get this going, we want to get it sooner than later, we don't want 3 months out. You know, we'd like to get them if we could within the next 30 days. Do something that's going to encompass a part of a day, not from 5 to 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night, that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I kind of think that we need, I don't know, the charrettes I've been involved in really do last all day. Now, maybe you don't invite people, the public in early on, but, the consultants themselves are sitting around starting at 8 or 9 in the morning, throwing ideas back and forth. Is that, again, you've probably done more charrettes than I have, but,
Probably even 2 days, I mean, to give this the time it needs, and that would be my guess.
okay. So the first, day one is them throwing things against the wall.
Yeah, and you guys all sitting down and talking and putting all the ideas out, then you produce, then you check in, then you produce.
And at some point during that process, we can come
Right.
in and throw our 2 cents worth, and the River Commission and Parks and Rec, and,
I mean, it'd be great, just like the 6th Street was the other night, of being able to have a handful of images on the wall, and you like this one, or this one, and you put the stick-em notes on it, and you find out what really, the direction you all and all your boards and community want to go.
I mean, this
Don't
is
you think?
maybe not a helpful comment, but the condition of the riverbank is so terrible now that I think whatever anybody comes up with is going to be treated with very favorably, so.
I agree with that, but if we're gonna spend the time, energy, and effort to do it, let's try
Yeah,
and,
right.
let's try and do it really
I mean,
well.
I think there's a lot, the point is there's a lot of right
Yeah.
answers, because right now we're.
There are a lot, yeah.
How about that? Is that better?
I agree with that 100%.
I'd like to soften this a bit and make it a little more doable. The park, the river shoreline, is a little different than 6th Street. Gary Lacy knows that shoreline, and I know that shoreline. Another consultant will have to spend a few weeks learning. It's a very dynamic river. It's a very strong river. It's different from 6th Street in that the elements are a lot more natural and landscape. I think that it would be a more efficient charrette to have Gary and I, because we know it, and have somebody, a third person, either, we're working on maps, we're not working on perspectives and pretty pictures of 6th Street.
Cars and
We're
parking
really-
and
We're really
all that
working
stuff.
on base maps, which we already have.
But I do think, Dean, though, that for, you know, you and I can look at a map and understand contours, and there's a lot of people that do want to see the perspective, and I think that's where someone like Jim Leggett could come in. You're drawing up the map, and then someone like, an illustrator like Jim Leggett, or someone else with a similar talent comes in and draws a perspective.
What about this, what about that?
So that they can actually see this element, how would that look, kind of a thing.
That will help. I'm suggesting that for bare bones getting consensus on a plan, that's icing on the cake, but it'll help.
Well, this is a political process, so I think it needs to be part of the preliminary work as well. I mean, the customer is everybody who lives in Glenwood Springs, and I think to have an illustrator on board early on would be a really good thing.
This is where you've landed.
Yeah.
This is where you landed. Critical improvements are a go, and that's just, the only thing you talked about tonight was the boat ramp. 2-day charrette, Gary Lacy, Dean Moffett, and an illustrator. That's your direction.
I support that.
I do too. I think that's a way
Agreed.
to start.
Anyone out there want to throw rocks at that idea? I'm willing to listen.
Sound reasonable to the planners in the room? Is that how we get to an illustrated consensus? Because I think that's the only way we're going to get there, is if it's an illustration. Everyone looks at it and goes, wow, that's beautiful.
Dean is a longtime member of the community. I think he understands the river better than just about anybody. I think if these guys can't come up with a good plan, and
One illustrator
be
or
really
two?
hard.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Just
whatever
one?
it takes.
Okay. Who, anybody?
Jim Leggett, unless he says no.
Well, is he our best riverfront? I know he does buildings and, he does buildings and, urban environments. I've never seen his work on.
If he's a good landscape illustrator, that works.
Okay.
Okay.
So should see if
That's 5. 6?
Right,
Okay.
unanimous? Yep, okay.
Thank
I'm
you.
good.
6-0.
Okay.
Spring cleanup.
I'm just sorry we don't have Lisa here.
She would be doing that.
She was best. She would be a great addition.